Hello again. When I spoke earlier today about the idea of ethno-nationalism, that is to say nationality being congruent with ethnicity, I suspect that many viewers were thinking to themselves, and why not? It is, after all, not exactly a new way of looking at things, and Europe from the mid-19th to mid-20th century thought that the nation state, based upon ethnic affinity, was the best way of ordering society. It was certainly the most common way. It is still the case that ethnic Greeks can claim citizenship of that country, even if their families have been living in, say, Turkey or Cyprus for centuries. Germany too preserves the idea of Volksdeutsche in their constitution. There was until a little over 20 years ago a similar way of thinking in this country. The idea of Englishness, which didn't disappear when an English family went abroad. Englishness was something which one could pass on to one's children, and it was implicitly a racial thing, being English equated with whiteness. I do not say whether this was a good thing or a bad thing, merely that it was a thing, until a few years ago. When did this change? As it happens, we can date the change in perception fairly precisely. Here's a book which was published in Britain 20 years ago. It's part of the old Teach Yourself series, which older viewers might remember with pleasure. They used to be very popular with people who wished to improve themselves without going to evening classes and so on. This one is 101 Key Ideas in History. Now, this is not the product of some crazed neo-Nazi. It's simply a neutral introduction to important ideas in the study of history. It was published in 2002, precisely 20 years ago. Let me read out a paragraph from the section on nationalism. Normally, nationalists believe in the unique organic qualities of their national community. Thus, nationalists identify a wide range of markers that they feel contribute to the creation of their national identity. These markers have included language, geography, culture, race, folklore, history or religion. For example, it is well known that the English are an island people. They are traditionally Protestant Christians, and they hold a sense of history that underlines their national strength in trade and warfare and national and naval supremacy. I mean, imagine mentioning casually that English nationality was tied up with Protestant Christianity today, or all that stuff about national strength in trade, warfare and naval supremacy. It's another world, isn't it? This sounds today like something one might read in a book from a Victorian classroom. And yet, 20 years ago, this was a fair and objective appraisal of the very idea of Englishness, of English nationality as it was generally accepted. So much has changed since the publication of this book that it's difficult to know where to start. Try mentioning that being English is part of a tradition of Christianity now, and you'll soon find yourself being accused of Islamophobia. Talk about our national strength in trade and naval supremacy, and how long do you think it will be before somebody mentions the slave trade? What about actually celebrating Englishness with an English flag, the Cross of St. George? Whoa, that might make the people next door scared if they are Asian or black. Englishness and English nationalism today is a hostile ideology which is opposed to the thinking of all modern and progressive people. It is often asserted today that there isn't such a thing as an English identity, and that even if there were, it's something to be ashamed of rather than to glory in. So what has changed since the publication of this book? That's not hard to see. When Labour were elected in 1997, they set out cold-bloodedly to change the ethnic composition of this country. This was to be done by opening our borders and allowing all the world to come here. Of course, many of those who came from Asia had different religions from ours, and so we had to stop talking of this being a Christian country. The very thought of saying what is printed in this book, that the English are traditionally Protestant Christians, became seen as a declaration of hostility towards Muslims. The increasing use of the term Islamophobia ensured that people stopped talking in that way about a Christian country. Then began an assault upon our history, our very sense of self, of who we are. The things of which we had once been proud, such as our valour in warfare, came to be seen as something to shut up about because it was part of the history of colonialism and slave trade. England's prowess at trade simply showed that they were part of the problem of Western capitalism, which had caused all the world's problems in the first place. Naval supremacy? That too was part of the problem. History had to be rewritten, a process which is still going on. A nation's identity is of course founded in great part upon pride in its history. If you can take an axe to that history and destroy it, then the national identity will also wither away. I've talked enough in the past about this process, and I'm sure that viewers have seen it happening for themselves. With the abandoning of our history, we also ditched the idea of ethno-nationalism, which had been a thread running through English history for many centuries. A lot of Europeans were doing the same thing. The European Union promised to make the ethno-state a thing of the past. In the Middle East and other parts of the world, ethno-states were and are still very much a thing, of course. We have the Arab Republic of Egypt, to give it its full and correct name, the Syrian Arab Republic, the Jewish Republic of Israel, and so on. Then we have nations openly defined by their religion, such as the Islamic Republic of Iran. In Europe, though, dropping religion and ethnicity as a way of defining a nation was seen as the up-to-date and progressive way of doing things. Between Tony Blair's government and the European Union's malign influence, English identity could hardly be expected to survive, and it barely has done.